Listen closely to this masterclass in political accountability, because Congressman Randy Feenstra just dropped the ultimate, undeniable receipts right on the desk of Trade Ambassador Catherine Tai's office, represented here by Ambassador Greer, turning what should have been a completely routine congressional hearing into a fiery, scathing indictment of international trade abuses.
It's being set up and developing. How do you think the more permanent Board of Trade will help and ensure China sticks to the purchasing agreement and provides better access for our U.S. producers? How do you see that playing out?
Well, remember, the Chinese economy is a command economy. They have something that passes as a private sector, but it's really beholden to the government and the party. In the U.S., we try to have as much of a free market economy, capitalist economy as we can. And so those economies don't fit together very well. So the Board of Trade is a mechanism, a government-to-government mechanism, where we can engage on terms that are mutually acceptable with the Chinese. If they're going to have a managed economy, then they can manage importing from the U.S.
Yes.
There is absolutely no room left in this chamber for the usual diplomatic double talk, political maneuvering, or empty bureaucratic promises. The core issue currently sitting on the table is glaringly clear and incredibly urgent. Foreign nations across the globe are actively, strategically weaponizing tariffs and utilizing heavy-handed state intervention to systematically choke out America's massive billion-dollar agricultural export industry. Stepping up to the microphone with unwavering resolve, Representative Feenstra is not just asking questions. He is representing the very livelihood, blood, sweat, and tears of the American heartland. By doing so, he is forcefully compelling Ambassador Greer to draw an uncrossable, permanent red line against these devastating retaliatory trade practices. You are going to want to stay tuned and watch this analysis until the very end, because the sheer gravity of this exchange is historically significant. From the incredibly direct, no-nonsense ultimatum delivered straight to the government of Mexico, all the way to the breathtaking moment where Greer completely exposes the manipulative inner workings of Beijing's rigid command economy. This entire exchange is an absolute masterclass in how a superpower must handle international adversaries who outright refuse to play by the established rules of a free and fair global market. Hit that subscribe button right now, and let us dive deep into the details, because when foreign governments start maliciously treating United States agriculture like a convenient political punching bag to solve their own domestic issues, you need to see the receipts for yourself. The high-stakes exchange officially begins with Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Neal presiding over the committee, setting the stage for what promises to be a rigorous session of congressional oversight. Congressman Feenstra takes the floor, but he does not begin with an attack. Instead, he starts by passionately applauding Ambassador Greer's ongoing tireless efforts on behalf of the American farmer. This is a brilliant rhetorical strategy. Feenstra does not rely on cheap, theatrical gotcha questions or sensationalist sound bites designed for evening cable news. Instead, he formally and methodically enters the raw, undeniable economic data of Iowa's absolute agricultural dominance directly into the permanent congressional record as his primary receipt. Representing one of the absolute largest and most productive agricultural districts in the entire nation, Feenstra highlights his home state's commanding, world-leading position in the mass production of corn, soybeans, high-quality pork, eggs, and cutting-edge biofuels. He paints a vivid picture of the sheer economic volume moving through his district. When Feenstra speaks directly to his local farming community, the hard-working men and women out in the fields from dawn until dusk, the underlying message they give him to take back to Washington is incredibly straightforward, proud, and deeply American. These farmers do not want a government handout. They are not asking for subsidies to save them. They simply want fair, transparent, and completely open global markets so they can competitively sell their world-class goods to the rest of the planet. They believe in their product, and they know that if the playing field is completely level, American agriculture will win every single time. This incredibly strong foundational opening transitions perfectly and seamlessly into the very first major international trade battleground of the hearing, the heavily targeted American pork production industry. Congressman Feenstra explicitly and forcefully calls out the alarm.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, and thank you, Ranking Member Neal, for holding this hearing today. Ambassador Greer, I just want to applaud you. I want to say thank you for what you're doing for the American farmer. I represent one of the largest ag districts in the country. When it comes to Iowa, in my district, we lead in corn, soybeans, pork, eggs, biofuels. And there's a lot of trade that we've been doing in those capacities. When I talk to the farming community, they don't want a handout. They just want open markets. And that's why this is so important. I want to just talk a little bit about the pork producers. They're facing anti-dumping and countervailing duties cases that are more political in nature than purely economic. You've just come back from Mexico, where a lot of these issues are somewhat prevalent. Can you talk about what your office is doing to ensure U.S. pork producers are not caught up in the crossfire of retaliation?
Yes, as you mentioned, I just came back from Mexico. I raised this specific issue. My sense is and again, there has been no retaliation thus far, which is very important to note. And I don't think we can have a deal with Mexico if we have retaliatory issues like
alarming, unacceptable reality that United States pork producers are currently being aggressively besieged by sudden anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases. He makes it crystal clear to the entire congressional committee and to the world watching that these restrictive duties are fundamentally political weapons, entirely divorced from pure, fair market economics. These are calculated moves designed to inflict maximum economic pain on American producers for political leverage. Noting that the ambassador has very recently returned from critical negotiations down in Mexico, where these exact types of protectionist issues and retaliatory threats are deeply prevalent and increasingly hostile, Feenstra demands total accountability. He wants to know, on the record, exactly what the United States Trade Office is doing right this second to ensure that innocent, hardworking American pork producers are not caught up and economically destroyed in the devastating crossfire of international retaliation. The definitive, indisputable receipt that Congressman Feenstra is holding up for all to see is the looming dark threat of Mexican trade retaliation. Ambassador Greer's response to this direct challenge carries the heavy, serious weight of a strict diplomatic ultimatum. Greer officially confirms to the committee that he did in fact directly raise this specific, contentious issue while sitting across the negotiating table in Mexico. While the ambassador carefully and legally notes that no formal retaliation has officially occurred just yet, a very important, measured distinction for the official congressional record, his diplomatic stance remains completely uncompromising and refreshingly blunt. Greer looks the committee in the eye and plainly states that the United States cannot possibly forge a lasting, mutually beneficial trade deal with Mexico if these exact types of retaliatory issues continue to hang over the ongoing negotiations. It is a brilliant display of utilizing diplomatic leverage. He expresses absolute, unwavering confidence that the Mexican government clearly understands this firm boundary. The message is sent out globally. America will not negotiate with a proverbial gun to the head of its agricultural sector. As the tension in the room settles from the Mexican ultimatum, the spotlight of the hearing rapidly and dramatically shifts from Mexico's localized political maneuvering to the colossal, globally disruptive economic machine of communist China. Congressman Feenstra pivots smoothly to the incredibly vital demographic of American soybean producers. He acknowledges, with pragmatic realism, that China remains a vitally important, massive export market, and he expresses genuine gratitude that Beijing is currently steadily fulfilling their massive purchasing commitments to the United States. However, the congressman is not there to simply offer praise, he is there to secure the future. He aggressively presses Ambassador Greer on the newly developing, highly anticipated U.S.-China Board of Trade. Feenstra asks the million-dollar question, how will this more permanent, institutionalized Board of Trade actually function in the real world to ensure that Beijing consistently sticks to its agricultural purchasing agreements over the long term, rather than just offering temporary appeasement? Furthermore, how will this mechanism guarantee broader, better, and more reliable access for American producers across the board? This exact moment is precisely where Ambassador Greer delivers an analytical masterpiece, completely exposing the fundamental, unresolvable clash between two entirely different global economic systems. Greer reminds the hushed hearing room of a basic, unavoidable fact. The Chinese economy is, at its very core, a heavily managed, strictly controlled command economy. While they possess what might outwardly masquerade to the untrained eye as a vibrant private sector, Greer accurately points out that every single corporate entity, large or small, remains entirely legally beholden to the strict directives of the Chinese government and the absolute authority of the ruling party. In stark, blinding contrast, the United States constantly strives to maintain and protect as much of a decentralized, free market, capitalist economy as organically possible. Because these two radically different, diametrically opposed economic systems do not naturally fit together, attempting to integrate them is like trying to mix oil and water. Therefore, Greer explains, the U.S.-China Board of Trade serves as a necessary, highly structured government-to-government mechanism. It is a controlled environment where the two superpowers can strategically engage on very specific terms that are mutually acceptable, without compromising America's free market ideals. Greer's ensuing answer lays a brilliant, inescapable strategic trap that Beijing cannot easily maneuver out of. He argues, with devastatingly simple logic, that if China is going to actively, deliberately run a tightly managed economy where the state controls everything, then they possess the absolute, unquestionable capability to directly manage their import quotas from the United States to fulfill their obligations. If the state commands the economy, the state can command the purchase of American agricultural goods. Instead of offering a standard, watered-down, deeply evasive diplomatic response, Ambassador Greer lays bare the naked, unvarnished truth about the harsh realities of doing business with a state-controlled superpower. The calculated, brilliant United States strategy moving forward is to explicitly identify the vital, high-value goods that America desperately needs to sell to maintain its economic dominance, alongside the non-sensitive goods they are perfectly willing to buy from China in return. The ultimate goal is demanding strict, undeniable predictability in an international trading relationship that is otherwise notoriously opaque and historically unreliable. This precise, calculated maneuver is exactly how America officially puts a manipulated command economy on high alert. It tells China that the United States sees exactly how the game is being played, and America is now fully prepared to use China's own centralized rules against them to secure a guaranteed market for American farmers. But Congressman Feenstra, acting as the relentless voice of the American agricultural industry, is far from finished with his intense line of questioning. He confidently brings forward yet another critical receipt, this time heavily focusing the committee's attention on the notoriously complex and highly restrictive markets of India, noting with a tone of deep concern that India remains, to this day, one of the most fiercely protected, heavily guarded agricultural markets in the entire world. Feenstra still expresses a sense of cautious, forward-looking optimism regarding the ongoing, highly sensitive U.S.-India Trade Framework Agreement. He specifically and scientifically highlights the massive, completely untapped export potential for highly specialized agricultural byproducts, specifically distillers, dried grains, commonly known throughout the industry as DDGs, as well as the incredibly lucrative market for high-protein soybean meal and clean-burning domestic ethanol. He forcefully presses the ambassador, demanding to know exactly where the United States currently stands in these delicate negotiations, and more importantly, what actionable steps the U.S. government can take right now to actively encourage the Indian government to accept more American agricultural products. He wants guarantees that American farm products will receive adequate, fair representation in overseas markets that have historically been slammed completely shut. Ambassador Greer formally confirms to the committee that a historic joint framework agreement has indeed been successfully signed, serving as a foundational document that officially sets the general, high-level terms of the long-term trade relationship. He also reveals a highly timely piece of information. Top-level Indian trade negotiators are actively in town that very week, sitting in rooms with U.S. officials to discuss these exact, highly specific commodities that the congressman just detailed. However, Greer is a seasoned diplomat, and he fundamentally refuses to sugarcoat the incredibly complex, often frustrating reality of the situation on the ground. He famously and accurately calls India a tough nut to crack right there on the permanent congressional record. He openly acknowledges the undeniable historical context that India has heavily, systematically protected its fragile domestic agricultural sectors for a very long time, utilizing complex tariffs and regulatory barriers. Furthermore, Greer realistically expects the Indian delegation to fiercely and passionately guard those historical protections during the upcoming grueling deal-making process. Yet, this is precisely where the American strategy shines. By constantly, relentlessly keeping the diplomatic and economic pressure fully applied, Ambassador Greer attempts to reclaim the absolute supremacy of global free trade rules over a deeply entrenched, isolationist, protectionist mindset that incorrectly views international commerce as a strictly one-way street meant only for their own benefit. Greer optimistically, yet firmly, notes that despite the historical roadblocks, mutual agreement on highly specific, beneficial products like DDGs is still highly achievable if the United States refuses to back down. Finally, as the comprehensive hearing nears its conclusion, the intense, highly technical conversation steers directly toward the vital future of domestic biofuels, specifically focusing on the massive, untapped global expansion of American ethanol. Congressman Feenstra warmly and enthusiastically praises the recent, undeniable, and massive diplomatic success achieved in the United Kingdom, where a staggering billion-liter market was successfully and permanently opened up for United States ethanol exports, representing a massive windfall for American producers. Capitalizing on this momentum, Feenstra directly asks the ambassador where else in the world, particularly looking toward the vast, rapidly developing energy markets across Asia or the massive economies of South America, the United States can effectively replicate this incredible billion-dollar export victory. Ambassador Greer confirms that, thanks to aggressive U.S. negotiations, multiple countries around the globe have recently agreed to significantly reduce their punitive ethanol tariffs, opening the doors for lucrative U.S. imports. However, Greer specifically and intentionally highlights the ongoing, incredibly complex, and high-stakes trade talks currently happening with the government of Brazil. With a refreshing dose of diplomatic honesty, Greer openly admits to the Congressional Committee that the current bilateral trade relationship with Brazil is, in his own exact words, a little more fraught right now. The tensions are high, and the negotiations are incredibly delicate. Despite this significant hurdle, Greer remains resiliently optimistic and fiercely determined, stating that he believes mutual, beneficial actions can still be carefully navigated to eventually reopen that absolutely vital, massive South American market to American energy exports. Ultimately, what this entire gripping congressional hearing brilliantly illustrates is a fundamental truth about global economics. When foreign governments stubbornly, selfishly protect their domestic agricultural sectors for extended periods of time, and when they focus their entire national energy entirely on maintaining deeply unfair, artificial economic advantages at the expense of others, the thin, polite mask of so-called global free trade completely drops to the floor. This powerful, deeply revealing congressional hearing proves exactly why those entrusted with positions of immense diplomatic power must aggressively, relentlessly fight for completely open markets on the chaotic world stage. As Congressman Feenstra so eloquently stated at the very beginning of the session, it is fundamentally not about the American farmer lazily demanding government handouts or seeking artificial subsidies to survive. It is about recognizing the undeniable, historical fact that truly open, transparent markets act as the absolute best possible disinfectant against global corruption, state-sponsored market manipulation, and deeply unfair, anti-competitive practices. True international accountability simply dies in the dark, silent shadows of unfair tariffs and punitive duties devised entirely behind closed, locked doors by unelected foreign bureaucrats. Whether the fierce, high-stakes battleground is defending the massive export of pork into Mexico, securing billion-dollar soybean contracts in communist China, or fighting tooth and nail to open up the ethanol markets in a resistant Brazil, the United States government is currently actively fighting on the front lines to completely smash through these artificial market barriers. They are fighting to protect domestic farmers and aggressively brush aside the distracting political noise to get to the core of free enterprise. The ongoing, relentless fight to protect a vital, multi-billion-dollar domestic agricultural industry does not simply stop when the gavel falls inside that congressional hearing room. When a dedicated, fiercely intelligent representative from the great state of Iowa mathematically and logically forces top-tier diplomatic officials to look directly, unflinchingly at Mexico's weaponized tariffs or China's blatant market manipulation, the fragile, polite diplomatic facade of empty international promises is permanently, violently torn away for the whole world to see. Transparency, as always, remains the single most powerful disinfectant of all in the murky world of international politics. The foundational, unbreakable rule established here today is absolutely crystal clear. There will be absolutely no further economic concessions for foreign adversaries who attempt to use cheap, manipulative political gimmicks to violently choke out the American free market system. Whether fiercely defending the crucial, life-sustaining export of pork, soybeans, or cutting-edge biofuels, the United States government must continuously, unapologetically leverage every single ounce of its massive geopolitical and economic power to aggressively tear down these protectionist walls, rather than just sitting idly by, absorbing the devastating financial hits, and watching the American heartland suffer. Now it is your turn to weigh in on this massive, globally important issue. Drop a comment down below right now and let your voice be heard loudly in this critical, ongoing debate. Do you genuinely think that foreign nations around the globe are continually, maliciously taking advantage of America's historical economic openness to arbitrarily dictate their own unfair, one-sided rules of the game? Should foreign nations be legally allowed by the international community to arbitrarily slap crushing, punitive, anti-dumping duties on hardworking United States producers without facing severe, immediate economic consequences? And finally, Looking at the entire exchange, does Ambassador Greer's forceful performance here today give you real, lasting confidence in the complex global trade law system, and is Congressman Feenstra's uncompromising, brilliant line of questioning enough pressure to force these stubborn global trade partners to finally back down and play fair? Share your unique perspective, your thoughts, and your analysis right now in the comments section. Let's loudly, proudly name the names of those brave leaders who properly put the American farmer's vital economic interests high above shady international backroom deals. And most importantly, make sure to completely smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a single update on this massive, ongoing global battle for fair trade, economic dominance, and the future of the American agricultural industry.